a trusted friend, security cameras that captured everything, and a deadly secret hidden under a tarp. What you're about to hear is the true story of how technology meant to provide safety became the key to exposing a murderer. This is the case of Linda Collins. Welcome to the evidence room. June 4th, 2019. The Randolph County Sheriff's Office in Arkansas received a phone call that would change everything. We've been trying to find her for the last few days, almost a week, and we haven't heard from her. The voice was trembling, barely holding together. What is your name, honey? Butch Smith. I'm her son. We came to do a wellness check at her house. I think I found the body. Butch Smith had just discovered his mother, Linda Collins, dead, and the way he found her suggested something far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. Before we continue, if you appreciate deep dives into cases like this, please hit that like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to the Evidence Room so you never miss an episode. Linda Collins was no ordinary person. She had dedicated 10 years of her life to public service as an Arkansas state senator. Though she'd recently lost her re-election bid, Linda wasn't the type to stay down for long. Moving out of my office today, Linda said in one of her final videos from the Capitol. I just want to say how humbled I am to be your senator, how proud I was to serve you. After leaving office, Linda returned to her hometown of Pocahontas, Arkansas, a small town of about 7,500 people. There, she focused on her 2 motel businesses and, most importantly, spent time with her grandchildren. Those who knew her described Linda as the fun grandparent. She had recently started dating again, reconnecting with a man from her past named Rendell Wallace. She was also exploring new career opportunities in lobbying. On May 27th, Linda traveled to Washington, D.C. for a job interview. After what seemed to be a successful meeting, she texted her daughter Tate about it. That would be the last real conversation anyone would have with Linda Collins. A couple of days later, Tate sent her mother a picture of new shoes she'd bought. But this time, there was no response, no reaction at all. At first, Tate wasn't too concerned. Her mother had mentioned being busy. But as days passed without any word from Linda, that unsettled feeling grew into something darker. Linda was supposed to be in Little Rock getting ready to attend the Arkansas Music Awards. When she didn't show up and still wasn't answering her phone, Tate called her brother Butch to check on their mother. Butch arrived at Linda's home to find her truck in the driveway. He knocked on the door. No answer. Looking through the windows, everything appeared normal. But without a key, he couldn't get inside. The next day, Butch returned with their grandfather, who had a spare key. Linda's father took a more thorough approach. He tried the doors on Linda's truck. They were unlocked. This was highly unusual. Linda was compulsive about keeping her vehicles locked. He tried the back door of the house. It too was unlocked. He stepped inside, calling out her name. He checked every room, every closet. No sign of Linda. But in the kitchen, there was a large, dark stain on the wooden floor. At first glance, it could have been coffee. Linda was a heavy coffee drinker, but something about it seemed wrong. As they left the house, Linda's father smelled something foul coming from the driveway. Beside Linda's truck were construction materials covered by a tarp. Butch walked over and lifted the edge of the tarp. A swarm of flies erupted into the air. The smell was overwhelming. There, beneath the tarp, wrapped in a blanket, was his mother. Linda Collins was lying face down, her arms above her head. She was gone. Butch immediately told his grandfather to stay back, physically blocking him from the horrific sight. Then he called 911. The Randolph County Sheriff's Office arrived within minutes, their body cameras recording everything. They established a crime scene perimeter and called in the Arkansas State Police. Sheriff Kevin Bell noticed something immediately suspicious: mounting brackets on the walls around the property designed to hold security cameras. But the cameras themselves were gone. Someone had removed them. On the walkway, he spotted a piece of what appeared to be a plastic hair accessory, broken and lying on the ground. Inside, the large stain on the kitchen floor told its own story. This wasn't coffee. With his trained eye, Sheriff Bell knew exactly what he was looking at: blood. When the Arkansas Mobile Crime Lab arrived, they examined Linda's body and determined the cause of death: multiple stab wounds. On the kitchen counter, investigators found a Clorox spray bottle with a smudge of blood on the nozzle, evidence of an attempted cleanup. There were no signs of forced entry, suggesting Linda may have known her attacker. Her body had been wrapped in a blanket to minimize evidence, then dragged outside and hidden under the tarp. Investigators needed to build a timeline. They needed to talk to everyone in Linda's inner circle. If you're finding this case compelling, please take a moment to subscribe to the Evidence Room and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. One of Linda's closest friends was Rebecca O'Donnell, known to everyone as Becky. Becky had started as Linda's personal assistant but quickly became more than just a coworker. As she drove Linda around and managed various aspects of her life, they became close friends. When investigators interviewed Becky, she was visibly emotional. "I love that woman like a sister, and this is killing me," Becky said through sobs. "She was my best friend." Becky explained that she had picked Linda up from the airport after her Washington trip. However, she was having trouble remembering details because she'd misplaced her phone that very day. "I'm lost without my phone," she explained. Becky's husband, Tim Loggins, a state corrections officer with 28 years of experience, had called them during the drive home from the airport. It was just simple conversation. Linda had been too tired to discuss her trip and said they'd catch up the next day. According to Becky, the following day Linda had texted her to bring lunch to the house. When Becky arrived, she found that Linda's new boyfriend, Rendell Wallace, had spent the night and had just left that morning. That's when Becky and Linda had gotten into an argument about Rendell. Linda had been upset because Rendell had taken 4 hours to respond to her messages the night before. "I told her she had no right to be upset," Becky explained. "I said she needed to slow down and get to know him better." But Linda didn't like being told what to do. Later that day, Becky called Linda, hoping to make amends, but they argued again. Linda mentioned she might go over to Rendell's place, which led to another tense exchange before Linda hung up. After that call, Linda was supposed to attend a meeting at one of her hotels. She never showed up. This made Rendell Wallace the next logical person to investigate. When investigators learned more about Rendell, they discovered he wasn't actually new in Linda's life at all. Before Linda had married her ex-husband, Phil Smith, she had been seeing both men. Eventually, she chose Phil, a decision she later regretted. Just weeks before her death, Linda and Rendell had reconnected. "We just picked up where we left off," Rendell told investigators. "We were just happy to be with one another." Linda loved to dance, and Rendell shared that passion. They frequently went dancing together. During her recent trip, Linda had flown to Arizona to celebrate her birthday with cousins. While there, she'd asked Rendell to meet her, but he declined due to finances. When Linda returned home, she invited Rendell over. They spent the evening together, and when he left, she walked him to the door. "We hugged and kissed, and she locked the door behind me," Rendell recalled. "I went out the patio door." After that night, Rendell had texted Linda several times throughout the week, but received no response. "I thought she was just in meetings down in Little Rock," he said. "I figured she'd get back to me later." Now, investigators had conflicting stories. Becky said that after their argument, Linda mentioned going to Rendell's place. Rendell said the last he saw Linda was kissing her goodbye before the argument with Becky happened. Someone wasn't telling the truth. Another name that kept surfacing was Linda's ex-husband, Phil Smith. Phil was an attorney and municipal judge when he met Linda. Together, they became a power couple, opening motels, advancing their careers, raising a family. But behind closed doors, things deteriorated. The settlement was bitter. After 23 years together, they divorced. Linda accused Phil of viewing pornography on his state-provided computer in his office. The Judicial Discipline and Disability Commission investigated and found Phil had indeed improperly used court equipment. He was essentially barred from serving as a judge in Arkansas ever again. Despite this, Phil received a significantly larger share of the marital assets. Linda felt cheated and filed an appeal. When the judge indicated the appeal could take another 17 months, Phil was reportedly devastated. This ongoing legal battle provided a potential motive. Phil's career was ruined, and another year and a half of divorce proceedings could have pushed him over the edge. But there was something else investigators learned. something even more disturbing. Multiple sources told investigators the same thing. Linda Collins had been genuinely afraid of Phil Smith. "Everybody I talked to says Linda was scared to death of Phil," one investigator noted. When asked directly, both Butch and Tate confirmed this fear was real. "Do you think your mom was scared of your dad?" "Yes, I firmly believe that she was afraid of him," Butch replied. "But why?" Tim Logan shared a disturbing story from the early 2000s. Linda had gone from being energetic to lethargic and bedridden. Doctors discovered she had an alarming amount of mercury in her body. They explored various theories, eating fish, dental fillings, but nothing explained the sheer amount in her bloodstream. One doctor said it was almost as if she'd drunk a thermometer. With no clear explanation, Linda became convinced that Phil had poisoned her. According to Becky, there were even darker allegations. She claimed Phil had been physically violent toward Linda during their marriage. "Phil used to hit her," Becky told investigators. Becky described an incident where Phil showed up at Linda's house while they were moving items out. Linda had been uncontrollably shaking, repeating, "Let's get out of here." Whether these allegations were true or not, Linda had taken them seriously. She changed her locks and, with help from Tim and Becky, installed an extensive security camera system around her property. Cameras covered every corner, every window, every entrance. Linda could monitor everything from her phone or laptop. For a woman who felt threatened, this must have provided comfort. But those cameras, intended to protect Linda from one perceived threat, would end up playing a very different role in this case. Sheriff Bell contacted Phil by phone. Phil denied any involvement in Linda's death and sent a written statement to NBC News. "I have not heard that Linda accused me of trying to poison her with mercury. I certainly did not do that," his statement read. "The divorce was unnecessarily bitter, but I was never physically violent or abusive toward Linda." While the investigation continued, 2 memorial services were held for Linda. The first was at the state capitol in Little Rock, where colleagues and political allies could pay their respects. Many wore red, Linda's favorite color. "Linda had a core set of values," one speaker said. "She lived them out and stood firm on them, no matter the cost. She was the same person behind closed doors as she was in public." The second memorial was held at a local church in Pocahontas for close family and friends. A family spokesperson read a prepared statement. "The family wants to thank everyone for the outpouring of love and prayers during this very difficult time. We ask for your understanding in being unable to speak about the ongoing investigation. We are shocked, upset, angered, and saddened by this event." While these services were being held, investigators were racing against the clock to find Linda's killer. Before we reveal what happens next, please help this channel grow by hitting that subscribe button and turning on notifications. Your support makes it possible to tell these stories with the care and detail they deserve. While the investigation was ongoing, Linda's daughter Tate did some investigating of her own. She logged into her mother's email account and made a crucial discovery. Linda's email was linked to her home security system. Anytime motion was detected, an alert was sent to her email. Tate found several motion detection alerts from the day Linda was believed to have been killed. This meant the cameras had been recording. Tate immediately contacted investigators who gained access to Linda's security system account. But there was a problem. Someone had logged into Linda's account on the same day she was killed and deleted all the footage from that day. The cameras had also been physically removed from the property. The killer had tried to erase all evidence. But investigators contacted the security company and requested any data stored on their servers. Within 2 days, a package arrived containing a flash drive. The company had been backing up footage to cloud storage. Even though the files had been deleted from Linda's account, they still existed on the company's servers. Investigators knew they had to work fast. Linda's second memorial service was about to begin, and they were confident the killer was someone close to Linda, someone who would likely attend. They gathered around computer monitors and began reviewing hours of footage. The footage showed normal activities at first. Then investigators saw Becky arriving at the house in the early afternoon on the day Linda was believed to have been killed. She stayed for just a few minutes before leaving. This matched what Becky had told them about bringing lunch. Hours passed on the footage with no activity. Then, something chilling. From the camera near the garage, a sound could be heard, faint but unmistakable. A scream. A horrible, blood-curdling scream. This was the moment Linda Collins had been attacked. The footage continued. Hours passed. Night fell. Then, movement. The camera captured a figure moving around the property, partially concealed by what appeared to be a white sheet. Investigators kept watching, switching between different camera angles. Someone was returning to the crime scene. They were getting close. And then they found it. When the cameras were removed from their mounting brackets, at least one had continued operating on battery power. Whoever removed the cameras had tossed them into a bag, thinking they were no longer recording. But they were wrong. One of those cameras kept recording. And even though it was in the bottom of a bag, even though the view was partially obscured, it had captured something crucial. It had captured the killer. The footage showed Becky O'Donnell. There was no question. It was her, and she was holding a knife. Both Becky and the knife were covered in blood. Investigators had their killer on camera. To an outsider, this revelation might have seemed shocking. But for investigators, Becky had been raising red flags from the beginning. During that first interview, when Becky had been sobbing about her dear friend Linda, experienced investigators noticed something odd. Becky was making all the sounds of crying, the sobs, the broken voice, but there were no actual tears. Then there was the issue with her phone. Becky claimed she'd lost it that very day, but her phone record showed she'd been using it during the exact time period when she claimed it was lost. Why lie about it? Tim had told investigators that Becky had been going to Linda's house almost every day since her disappearance, but when asked about this, Becky couldn't remember which day she'd been there. It seemed like she didn't want investigators to know she'd been returning to the crime scene repeatedly. As investigators dug deeper into Becky's background, they uncovered something troubling. In 2007, Becky had been accused of plotting to have her then-husband killed. A friend had told him that Becky was offering $50,000 to anyone who would kill him. When questioned, Becky claimed she'd been drunk and wasn't serious. Without additional evidence, no charges were filed. But now, 12 years later, here she was being investigated for another murder. A murder she had actually committed. Investigators shared their suspicions with Butch and Tate. "I've got to tell you, there are things that aren't adding up with Tim and Becky's stories," one investigator said. "I kind of felt like there was something off about those two," Butch admitted. "I'd never even heard of them until the divorce. Then suddenly they were all up in Mom's business." But despite all these red flags, investigators still didn't have a clear motive. The answer came from Butch and Tate. In the weeks before Linda's death, her father had noticed money disappearing from his bank account, transactions he didn't authorize. "My mom would never just take from my grandpa," Tate insisted. "That's not something she would ever do." But remember what Becky had admitted during her interview? She'd told investigators that Linda trusted her completely with financial matters. She'd even admitted to signing Linda's name on checks. "A lot of times, Linda would have me sign checks or get her cash," Becky had said. "You were signing her name?" "Yeah." Investigators came to believe that Becky had been stealing from Linda for months, not just from Linda's father, but from the business accounts as well. She'd been forging Linda's signature, writing checks to herself, siphoning off money. Linda had been traveling so much that she hadn't been carefully monitoring her accounts. She'd trusted Becky to handle things. But when Linda came home from Washington and Arizona, Tate had told her about the unauthorized withdrawals from her father's account. Linda must have started looking into her own accounts more carefully. She must have realized what Becky had been doing. And she must have confronted Becky about it. That argument Becky described about Linda's relationship with Rendell? Investigators believed that was fabricated. The real argument had been about theft, about betrayal, about Linda discovering that her trusted friend had been stealing from her. And Becky, realizing she was about to be exposed, had snapped. This was the motive investigators had been looking for. With video evidence and a clear motive, investigators knew they had enough to make an arrest, but they had to move quickly. As Becky's vehicle approached the church for Linda's memorial service, police lights appeared behind her. She pulled over. Officers informed Becky O'Donnell that she was under arrest for the murder of Linda Collins. She was handcuffed, read her rights, and placed in a police cruiser. While Linda's friends and family gathered inside the church to mourn, the woman responsible for her death was being transported to the police station. In the interrogation room, investigators laid out what they knew. "We got you. We got video of you. You didn't erase them all. We got you." Becky immediately requested a lawyer, ending the interrogation. She was taken to jail to await trial. While Becky sat in jail, Tim Logan stood by her, calling regularly and offering support. "I love you. I believe in you," he told her during one call. For months, the case moved through the legal system. Eventually, prosecutors offered a deal. If Becky pleaded guilty, they would take the death penalty off the table. Before accepting, Becky wanted Tim to hear the truth from her. Her attorneys had him sign a non-disclosure agreement, and then Becky confessed to Tim that she had killed Linda Collins. Tim was devastated. But things got even worse. News broke that while in jail, Becky had confided in fellow inmates about a plot to have Phil Smith and his new wife killed. She told inmates who were due to be released that there was gold and silver in Phil's home that would be theirs if they completed the job. She even wrote a fake note for them to plant at the scene. But instead of agreeing, those inmates went to the authorities with proof of what Becky had been planning. Now, on top of murder charges, Becky faced additional charges for solicitation of murder. When confronted with evidence of this plot, Becky reportedly claimed the bloody knife in the security footage had been used for preparing chicken and that investigators had doctored the video. That explanation held no weight. The evidence was overwhelming. Becky ultimately accepted the plea deal. In August of 2020, Rebecca O'Donnell stood before a judge to be sentenced. As she entered the courtroom, reporters called out to her. "Ma'am, do you have anything to say to the family?" Becky remained silent. The judge handed down the sentence, 50 years in prison. Becky received 40 years for first-degree murder and 3 years for abuse of a corpse, running consecutively. She also received 7 years for each of 2 solicitation charges, running concurrent to each other but consecutive to the other sentences. In total, 50 years behind bars. At the sentencing, Tate spoke on behalf of her family. "What happened to my mother was an awful deed, carried out of hate, jealousy, and greed. I believe that Becky O'Donnell was stealing money from my mother, and when my mother confronted her about it, she snapped. Today, our family has found justice. No amount of punishment will ever fill the void that Rebecca O'Donnell made in our lives. But today, we find some peace, knowing that she will be put away in prison for a very long time, unable to hurt anyone else." The case of Linda Collins is a tragic reminder that the people closest to us can sometimes be the ones who hurt us most. Linda trusted Becky O'Donnell completely. She gave Becky access to her finances, her home, her daily life. She considered Becky a dear friend. And Becky abused that trust in the worst possible way. When Linda discovered the theft and confronted her, Becky's response was to kill. The security cameras Linda had installed to protect herself from her ex-husband ended up being the very thing that brought her killer to justice. Even though Becky tried to delete the footage and remove the cameras from their mounts, the technology preserved the evidence. Those cameras captured Becky's return to the crime scene. They captured her with the murder weapon, covered in Linda's blood. They provided the proof investigators needed to ensure justice. Linda Collins lived a life of service and dedication. She spent 10 years in the state Senate. She built businesses that employed people in her community. She was a mother and grandmother who loved her family deeply. Her death was senseless and cruel, the result of greed and betrayal. But her legacy lives on in the memories of those who loved her. Rebecca O'Donnell will spend the rest of her productive years behind bars, unable to hurt anyone else. And perhaps that's the best we can hope for, that the person responsible is held accountable, and that the victim's family can find some way to move forward. Thank you for watching this episode of The Evidence Room. If this case affected you, please hit that like button and leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. And if you haven't already, subscribe to The Evidence Room and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Until next time, stay safe. And remember that justice, even when delayed, still matters. This has been The Evidence Room.